In this lesson, we will learn how to wire parameters. When we wire a parameter, we cause that parameter to be controlled directly by the object that we have wired it to. For example, if we wire an object that has a value of 5 to an object that has a value of 0, that object that was set to 5 will now be set to 0 because it's directly controlled by that object, that 0 object. So that's how wire parameters work. Later we'll learn how to create a relative offset so we can keep our value of 5 if we need to, linked to an object that has a value of 0. But let's go ahead and get right into this lesson. So what we'll do is use wire parameters to control the canopy as well as our turrets. Let's go ahead and start with the canopy. Now before we wire anything, we need to figure out what attribute we'll need to wire. If we select our canopy and press the E key to grab our rotate tool, this will give us an idea of the axis that we would need to wire. However, to make sure that we are grabbing the right axis, right now it looks to be the y-axis, but just to know for sure, it's a good idea to switch your coordinate system for the rotate manipulator to gimbal. That will show you the object's true axis. So take a look at that. Notice how it has changed to reveal that the z-axis is truly the axis we need to control the canopy with. Now when it comes to the move tool, we'd want to work with parent mode, again so we can see the true axis of this object. I'm going to press the E key to go back to the rotate manipulator. And just FYI, if you find that the manipulator is a bit too large, you can go ahead and use the minus and plus keys on your keyboard to change the size. Not the minus and plus keys on your number pad. Okay, those won't do anything. Alright, so we know it's the z-axis. Now another thing we want to do is make sure that this object is frozen. Remember, when we freeze an object, it's zeroed out. So since our custom parameter by default is set to 0, in order for no shifting to occur, we simply want to make sure that this object here has been frozen. So with the canopy selected, we'll go ahead and Alt right click and choose Freeze Transform just to be on the safe side. Great. Alright, so now in order to access the wire parameter tool, we have a few ways we can do that. Underneath animation, notice we can grab it from here, wire parameters. Or notice the hotkey Control 5. I tend to stick with hotkeys because they're intended to work faster. So with the canopy selected, we'll press Control 5. And now take a look, we can start to wire this parameter. By the way, this little window here will appear on the pivot point of your object. For example, if we were to select the main control here and use Control 5, notice where the window ends up, right at the pivot point. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and select the canopy again, use Control 5, and now we'll choose Transform Rotation. Very important, since we have frozen the transforms of this object, we just need to make sure to go to Zero Euler, go to that new rotate list we've created. And now we'll choose the z-axis. Okay, so next we need to go ahead and connect to the object that should control the z-axis, and that is our main control. Let's go ahead and click it. And now to get more specific, to get to those custom parameters, we choose Modified Object, Secondary Controls. Here's our attribute holder, Custom Attributes, and now we can go ahead and find the canopy attribute. So notice our parameter dialog has appeared. So take a look at the order in which it's loaded in. You can see that the object that we want controlled is loaded on the left side because we selected it first. And here's the object we want to control it with. So we have these arrows to determine what direction we'd like to create control for. Take a look at the arrows at the top. With this, we can create a bidirectional parameter. Now, I would highly recommend that we only use this for very simple connections. When you start to create more complex controls, you may not want to use this choice. But just to kind of show you how this works, I'll use the bidirectional control and choose Connect. So what this means is that when we go to our canopy, press the E key to go to our rotate tool, we can go ahead and rotate this up. Let's go back to our control object to see what happens. It's actually going to update the canopy value. So notice we can control the canopy from here. The reason why we did not see a change when we rotated this object is because when we rotate the canopy, we're actually going to -60, but our custom parameter was set to a positive range. So we'll need to go in and change that. But if we were to go to our canopy here and rotate that down, and now go back to our custom parameter, then we'll start to see that value here, that value change. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and right click to zero this out, and notice that we'll also zero out our canopy. So that's a lot of control here, and sometimes it can get confusing, so we want to be very careful about using the bidirectional control. So what we'll do is go back to our parameter dialog, and we will not use that first choice. Instead, we want to connect from the canopy parameter to our z-axis. So we'll go ahead and use this second choice, and now we can choose connect. All right, this will give us a warning just letting us know that we want to confirm this change. We'll choose yes. So now you can see that the controlling parameter is green and the parameter being controlled is red. All right, so let's go ahead and now close this out and go ahead and update our canopy just to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So we know how to do this. Let's go ahead and use Alt-1 to grab our parameter editor. We can now go to Edit Delete, grab the canopy parameter. Notice its properties are loaded in. Let's go ahead and change our from value to -100. Our to value, we can set that to 0. All right, so from there, remember, we need to make sure to choose accept parameter changes, and now we'll choose apply changes. So let's take a look. We'll go ahead and close out the parameter editor. You can see now, when we move in the negative direction, we're now controlling the canopy. Great. Now you can see that we have this very coarse control here. It'd be nice to get more finer control. In order to do that, we can use a very simple function in front of our wire parameter equation. So if you want to get back to the wire parameter dialog, let me go ahead and show you something. We can use Alt-5 to open up that dialog window. Now to get to those objects much faster that we've wired together, we can go ahead and select them. I'll go ahead and start with the canopy, and I'm actually going to go ahead and load that up on the right side, so we'd simply use refresh. Notice here's the canopy. When we select the object that holds our custom parameters and choose refresh, notice we quickly can get to those parameters that we've wired. We can go ahead and expand them until we get to our rotation track, and there's the rotate Z. Notice it's highlighted red. And to find that parameter that we have controlled it with, that's modified object, secondary control, custom attributes, and there is the canopy here. So let's go ahead and select both, and you can see now we are brought back to that equation that was used to connect the two. Now in front of canopy, we'll type in as follows: capital DEG, capital TO, capital RAD. What this does is it's going to convert our degrees here to radians. Now if we were to go ahead and concatenate or put in parentheses canopy, now this will tell Max that we want to apply this function to this specific parameter. Alright, so let's go ahead and now choose update and watch this. Closing this out, if we were to now use the canopy attribute, notice we have much more ideal control over the canopy. Beautiful. So we can now apply these same settings to our turrets. So remember, selecting them, and I'll just go ahead and select these orange objects because the ends of the turrets are already connected to these orange objects. The next thing I'm going to do is make sure that the pivot mode for these objects is set to from pivot. Right now it's set to from center. That's why we're not getting the best rotational control here. But if we were to update this, making sure that we pivot from the pivot point, the true pivot point of this object, now when we rotate, that's much better. So you want to check that from time to time. But with these objects selected, again, what we want to do is Alt-right click and choose Freeze Transform, just to make sure they're zeroed out to match the values of our custom parameters. Alright, so the next thing we will want to do is go in and start creating the parameter wiring. Alright, so we can go ahead and select our control first. We can use control 5, and now that's going to be modified object, setting secondary controls, custom attributes, and we'll grab turrets. Let's go ahead and select the first orange object here. That's going to be transform, rotation, and if you recall, it was actually the x-axis that we want to control, so let's go ahead and tie that in. Alright, great. So we'll now use the bottom arrow since we're connecting turrets into the x-axis, and we'll use our deg to rad function, and we'll make sure to put turrets in parentheses. So now when we choose connect, here we have it. Now when we use the turret channel, everything's working properly. Great. If you ever need to update your equation, go ahead and make changes and simply choose update. If you need to disconnect, you can do that from here. Alright, so let's go ahead and finish this up by wiring the last turret. So with our control still selected, we'll use control 5, modified object, we'll grab the custom parameter turrets, and we'll select that next orange object. And that's going to be the rotate X, 0 Euler, rotate X. We'll use the last arrow to make our connection, and we'll add our deg to rad function. Okay, beautiful. So now when we choose connect, everything should be working properly. Let's go ahead and start to work with the turret channel, and there we have it. Alright, so in this lesson we have learned how to wire parameters, a great way to create a direct connection. Now in the next lesson you will learn how to create your first expression.